In 70 AD, the Roman Emperor Vespasian brought back a tax on urine. Not metaphorically, actual human urine, collected from Rome's public latrines, then hit with a government fee before anyone was allowed to touch it. When his son Titus called it humiliating, Vespasian reportedly held a gold coin under his nose and asked, "Does it smell?" Titus said no. Vespasian smiled. And yet, it comes from urine. That story is funny. It's also one of the most accurate descriptions of how humans think about money ever recorded. So, the actual mechanics Roman fullers, the tradesmen who cleaned and whitened wool, needed ammonia. The cheapest source available? Human urine. Collectors went to Rome's public latrines with clay jars, filled them, hauled them back to the workshop floor. Zero cost, solid profit. One emperor, Nero, had tried taxing that trade years earlier and dropped it fast. The backlash wasn't worth it to him. Vespasian didn't have that luxury. He inherited an empire fresh out of civil war and a treasury with almost nothing left in it, so he brought the tax back for good. Historians later gave it a name, vestigial urani. Workshops now paid a fee just to access what they'd been collecting for free. The treasury got richer, and the exchange with Titus got compressed over the centuries into three words: pecunia non olet. Money doesn't smell. A few years later, some of that same money helped fund something else Vespasian built: Rome's first network of public toilets. The thing he taxed also paid for more of it to tax. Keep that loop in mind. It's about to show up again, 2,000 years later, in almost exactly the same shape. Now picture a workshop owner, let's call him Gaius, the week this tax lands. Outraged, morally offended. The government is taxing toilets now? Then Gaius runs the math. Costs are up maybe 12%. Manageable. Every competitor pays the same rate, so the floor doesn't tilt against him. A quiet voice in his head settles it. Money is money. Within a season, Gaius relabels the line item in his books. Not urine fee, but raw material procurement cost. One small rename, and somehow that's enough to make it sit fine. Not ancient history, just cognitive dissonance with a Roman accent. This has a name in behavioral finance: habituation to the absurd. Something starts as a scandal and, within a generation, turns into background noise. Just a line on the ledger nobody flags anymore. The tax outlived Vespasian by centuries. It became so stitched into Rome's economy that 2,000 years later, French public toilets are still called Vespasiennes after him. By the time Gaius's son inherited the workshop, he never once questioned the fee. It was just a cost of doing business, like ink or water. Push that same instinct further, past a lawful fee and into something actually dangerous, and you get what sociologist Diane Vaughan called normalization of deviance, the exact mechanism behind the Challenger disaster and behind 2008 when toxic mortgage bond quietly became structured investment vehicle until the relabeling itself was the argument for buying it. The urine tax didn't kill anyone, but it ran on the same wiring. Every few generations, someone points at a new version of it and asks the same lazy question: does the money still spend? So far, the answer has always been yes. Here's the part that isn't ancient at all. In May of 2018, the US Supreme Court struck down a federal law that had banned sports betting in almost every state for over 2 decades. For most of a century, the position was simple: it's gambling, and gambling wrecks lives, homes, marriages. Betting ads got bleeped out of broadcasts. Athletes could be banned for life for so much as talking to a bookie. Within a few years of that ruling, most of that position evaporated, state by state. By 2026, sports betting is legal across most of the country. States have collected more than $9 billion in tax revenue off it since 2018, on close to $150 billion wagered every year. The same leagues that fought legalization in court for decades now run betting odds inside their own broadcasts. Watching a game without seeing a betting line on screen is the unusual experience now, not the normal one. Look at how individual states price that discomfort. New York takes 51% of every dollar its sportsbooks make. 51. Illinois taxes every single bet placed. A quarter for the first 20 million bets a company handles, 50 cents after that. So the sportsbooks simply added their own fee onto every wager to cover it. The discomfort didn't disappear. It just moved down the ledger from the state to the company to the person placing the bet, each one relabeling it as a cost of doing business on the way past. Here's the detail that would make Vespasian smile. Some of that tax money is earmarked by law to treat gambling addiction. There's a federal bill sitting in Congress right now that would formally dedicate half the federal betting tax specifically to addiction treatment and research. The industry that profits from the bet gets taxed to help clean up the bet. The gambling industry itself has pushed back against that bill, not because they oppose treatment, they say, but because they'd rather the tax didn't exist in the first place. Even the cleanup fee has a lobbyist against it. There's research suggesting the trade isn't even as good as it looks on paper either. States typically collect around 25 cents in tax for every dollar spent on lottery tickets. From sports betting, it's under 1 cent. Some economists think a lot of this new betting revenue is mostly old lottery money wearing a new shirt, while the social cost keeps climbing regardless. No governor has to hold up a coin and ask if it smells. They just point at the number, the same way Gaius pointed at his ledger. This isn't a story about whether legalizing sports betting was the right call. Reasonable people land on different sides of that. It's the exact same move Vespasian made in 70 AD, now running at government scale in plain daylight, argued about on cable news. The discomfort doesn't go away. It gets a line item, and once something has a line item, it has somewhere to live that isn't anyone's conscience. If a government can do this in public, with a press release and a bill number, you doing a quieter version of it in private isn't exactly a stretch. This is where it gets personal. Every investor has a Gaius moment, some early discomfort that gets rationalized, relabeled, and quietly filed away. The ethical investor who owns the tobacco stock because it's buried 3 layers deep in an index fund they never opened. The retirement account left on autopilot for a decade because actually checking what's inside it would mean admitting a few things they'd rather not defend out loud. Or the crypto position from a few years back that never comes up at dinner because actually explaining how you got into it would take longer than anyone wants to sit through. The framing changes, the discomfort fades, the behavior stays exactly where it was. Vespasian's real legacy isn't the tax, it's the cognitive move underneath it. Humans aren't rational actors, we're rationalizing ones. Before you file that under ancient history, check your own portfolio. Quietly broke. Real stories about money nobody tells you. Now, the real twist. Vespasian's urine tax worked, not because it was logical, but because once the money started flowing, nobody in power seriously wanted to stop it. 2,000 years later, nobody in a state house wants to stop $9 billion either. We don't grade revenue streams on their merits. We grade them on how uncomfortable the question makes us feel, then look for a way to stop feeling it. The emperor who taxed latrines had already found that shortcut 2,000 years before behavioral economics had a name for it. Discomfort isn't a red flag. It isn't a green light either. It's just the moment right before you decide whether to keep looking or start relabeling. Most of us relabel. Rome did. Congress does. There's no reason to assume you're the exception. One piece of homework. Name the one income stream or investment you've been avoiding. Not because you ran the numbers, but because it feels embarrassing to admit out loud. Subscribe to Quietly Broke for the next story that turns history into a mirror. Drop a comment. What's the urine tax in your financial life? The unglamorous thing you've quietly rationalized away? Or, if you'd rather point at someone else's first, what's a modern tax or fee you think is really just a polite word for something uglier? This video is for general educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not financial advice.